Dustin, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it. You're representing Mr. Cannabis Law out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm excited to talk about some new things that you guys got going on and some new things in my opinion, in law in general, and definitely new for the cannabis and psychedelic space. I'm excited to talk about that, and we're just going to get right into it. Something that really drew me to you guys and I wanted to learn more about is you guys are investing into AI. I'm very interested in AI. We've used it a little bit in our companies, and it's just amazing the potential that is there. I'm interested to see, how are you guys using it in the cannabis and psychedelic space?
Mr. Cannabis Law is my law firm. I also have an investment fund called Eater Investments. We invest in various different types of companies. But yeah, the law firm, I think for the legal industry, AI is going to have a huge impact. Technology, this is nothing new to the legal industry. We saw this back in the day. We used to do research. Lawyers used to do research, going into books and reading treatises and, going to the library to do legal research. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of the internet, all of a sudden they could research and look up things on the internet. And then the advent of companies like LexisNexis and Westlaw, where you pretty much have everything right at your fingertips. And a lot of lawyers didn't switch over back when this was first invented, and those lawyers were very much left behind and ultimately had no choice. Now, at this point, there's probably no attorneys that are really doing research in the books. Everyone's using like Westlaw or LexisNexis. So technology is nothing new, and it's not even that unique to the legal industry. At the end of the day, before I launched my law firm, I was running a manufacturing company. We were doing about $50 million in revenue. We grew it very quickly, and we always embrace technology. So in any business, you got to be looking at what the latest technology is, and you got to make sure you're investing into it. So we've been very big on that from the very beginning. Before even, we have other technology initiatives outside of AI that we're very serious about. But when AI came along, I started, was very early to kind of do the ChatGPT Plus upgrade for $20 a month. I'm still surprised when I hear people that aren't paying the $20 a month just to be on the cutting edge of this technology. But played around with some of the plugins on ChatGPT Plus and looked at a lot of the different companies that are launching around building software for AI software for the legal industry, and really found that there wasn't that many software systems that really did the stuff that I needed it to do to streamline some of my activities. And ultimately what we're trying to do is reduce our time spent so that we could pass that along to clients and do things more efficiently and ultimately at a more price competitive number for our clients. So we're doing we got various activities. Right now we're really in the due diligence phase. We're playing around with a bunch of different opportunities. So, one of the things our law firm does a lot of is application drafting. So if someone wants to get a license in a particular state, we basically, do all the legal work. We draft the application. We all put together a team. Certain activities in there, very hard for AI to do, but there are other activities where I think we could save tremendous amount of time. So right now we're working on a project where I just finished an application in Florida. They had a round in April of this year, and very long. It was probably 11 weeks, pretty much working 7 days a week nonstop. And so right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to generate that application through AI. And if we can do that, we're going to roll it out for other states. We just finished like 15 applications in New Jersey. We've got like 12 we're doing in New York once they pass their regulation. So if we could save time and kind of automate some of that stuff. So that's more like the customer facing like outputs that we're working on, but also just streamlining client intake, billing, things of that nature. Anywhere where we're doing manual entry, we're trying to find ways that we can apply AI to it and streamline it.
Now you started mentioning some other states that you guys are involved in. So I assume, how many states does your firm work in? How many states you guys license in for cannabis?
Yeah, we're in Florida, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Michigan, California, and should be adding Arizona very shortly.
Wow. That's awesome. With that, you guys have a broad overview of a lot of different laws and regulations and the differences between the states and everything. While there are while there are differences between each state, there's a lot of common ground and commonalities that you can find. What are some of those common issues that new licensee people are running into that maybe could be fixed? And what do you guys think? How could we fix that?
Really, to be successful in application, you need team, you need capital, you need real estate. That's pretty much the items that you really need. And, our law firm helps with all of those items. It's kind of the same in every single state with respect to the application. With that being said, a lot of states are very different. Some of these states are now moving towards like lottery systems. So you just kind of need to do the bare minimum. And in those states, like really people are just looking for templates. Like it doesn't make sense for someone to hire an attorney for, $100K to draft an application when ultimately they're just looking for the bare minimum, and then you get put into a lottery. So DC is a lottery. Even Maryland in their upcoming round, they're moving towards a lottery. Illinois, we originally did competitive applications in Illinois, but then in their last round, they switched over to lottery. So, when you think about like it being a lottery, it starts to, price lawyers like us out. It just doesn't make sense for us to get involved in those types of states. But if we could provide templates through AI and automate some of that so that the clients, it doesn't take us much time and it doesn't cost the clients that much money, then there's certainly opportunities there. So I think what we're seeing is like the states, most of them were pretty highly competitive applications. And as a result, we charged quite a bit of money for application drafting. We're starting to see more states go towards, simplified and kind of lottery systems. So we just want to make sure we adopt with the changes that are happening. But either way, it's important you work with an attorney. I mean, regardless of the application process, you need to create your corporate entity. You need to make sure it's structured well from, a liability and tax perspective. Most of the time you're raising capital. So, you're going to need shareholder agreements or operating agreements. So either way, I mean, whether it's working with my law firm or another law firm, I always recommend if you're working in the cannabis industry, you're probably at some point going to need to hire an attorney.
I agree. One of the other things that I do is I'm the COO of a new cannabis lounge that's coming into Las Vegas. We were able to do lottery system. So Nevada did the lottery system for their new app licenses that they were giving out. They were giving out a total of 40 cannabis consumption lounge licenses. 20 were going to current dispensary license holders, and then 20 were going to independents. You had to put, like you said, basically like an outline business plan and everything. You put it together upon initial review and approval. You were entered into the lottery system after paying your fee. And then if your number was drawn, then you went on through the rest of the approval process. So our number was drawn. I will say from experience, though, man, I would have rather had a way more detailed plan up front, because that's what we're having to go through now. The law firm that we were working with, that was what they had recommended, was like, you can basically just kind of get by, you put your stuff together. But then now after we won the license through the lottery, now they're like, okay, now let's do the super deep dive on you. So it's like, man, I wish I would have had this done beforehand. But you're right. The fees and everything, I mean, we've already invested into the six figures with attorney fees and compliance and stuff, just trying to make sure everything is what they need it to be. And the hard part of this here in Nevada right now is they don't even have the full regulatory, they don't even have all the regulations defined yet for these consumption lounges. And they're doing it on the fly as we roll through, as lounges are opening up or trying to open up, they're changing regulations or trying to adopt new regulations. So
yeah, I mean, I always tell clients that, these questions sometimes on the application that they're drafting, really, these are things you should be putting together if you're looking to launch a business. You need to build a financial model. You need to have a business plan. You need to build an org chart. I mean, these are all pretty basic stuff that if you're not taking those simple steps and not willing to spend the money on taking those simple steps, probably not a client we really want to work with. We want to work with serious players. But with that being said, our law firm, we specialize with the small to mid-sized guys. Like, we're a small boutique law firm. We don't, we've done a lot of deals with some of the big MSOs, and, we've even represented a lot of big MSOs. We've co-counseled with attorneys on, M&A deals for MSOs, but our bread and butter is the small to mid-size. So with that being said, I understand that when you're a small company, you're just starting up, you generally don't have that much capital. So we're very cognizant of that, and we structure our fees accordingly, and we work with our clients and we advise them accordingly. Like, quite frankly, like we could churn out a pretty basic business plan to get you entered into the lottery, that's cost efficient. And then once you won, now let's spend the real money to really iron it out. So, sometimes it just doesn't make sense to spend that much money on the front end if you're not positive you're going to win that license. Then you have states like Florida where, there's no conditional licensing or anything. It's not like you go into a lottery. It's just straight competitive. So, in this last round in Florida, just the fee to apply that you pay to the state is over $140K. So, that's just for this. Then you need to hire attorneys. It's a vertically integrated license. So you're going to need real estate. In order to be competitive, to have a competitive application in Florida, you have to spend at least $500K, but more realistically, probably going to spend over $1 million. We spent well over $1 million just on our application that we did in Florida. So every state is different. It's good in those conditional states where, you kind of apply, find out if you won, and then you could go out and get your real estate and everything. But other states, it's like you got to put out all the money on the front end and just pray that you're going to be on the winning end.
And then you have states like Arizona, where just to get the piece of paper to apply is like $10 million. It's insane out there. It's insane. We've been talking to some people and trying to explore the opportunities out there, but it's very much a monopoly. Kind of switch gears for a second. So, we've talked about cannabis, and I've talked to several people here recently about cannabis here on the show, but one thing that we've sprinkled in a little bit is the psychedelic stuff. I've had some authors and some scientists and subject matter experts on the plant itself, but one person that we haven't had on yet is someone that knows about the laws. And a lot's changed here recently within the last year in America concerning psychedelics. Now you have states, states like Colorado, DC, California, Michigan, where it's decriminalized either statewide or in certain municipalities. You have states like Utah, Texas, Maryland, where it's legalized for working medical research. Washington, decriminalized. And then you have states like Oregon, where it's completely legal and they have some type of regulatory statutes on the books as well. Can we dive into that a little bit? Can we, if you have the knowledge on it, can we maybe go a little bit state by state and kind of tell us the differences and what this means?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do a lot of work on the psychedelic side. So my investment fund, we have a little under 30 million assets under management, and we've invested in 18 companies. Most are psychedelic. It's not all psychedelic companies. We're really trying to find mental health solutions. We're in a global mental health crisis right now. So we've invested in like VR meditation applications and stuff like that. But most of our investments are on the psychedelic side. And most of our investments are actually outside of that paradigm that you just described. Really, I see the opportunity in psychedelics more so as drugs that are approved as FDA pharmaceuticals. So we've invested in a lot of different drug development programs, taking compounds through the FDA process for various indications. We've got psilocybin clinical trials going on. We have MDMA clinical trials, ketamine, various psychedelic analogs, 5-MeO DMT, and even, we've invested in like new chemical entities, psychedelic new chemical entities. So a lot of people don't realize like MDMA and LSD, those are, man-made compounds. They do also, live in nature, but they're basically man-made compounds. And that really, all that research stopped in the 70s once they were put on the Controlled Substances Act as Schedule 1. And as a result, the research just stopped. So, those are incredible compounds, but there's literally an infinite amount of different types of compounds, psychedelic compounds that you can create that hit different serotonin receptors that are optimized for the medical program. It's not ideal. LSD and psilocybin can take anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. If you're someone suffering from major depressive disorder, not exactly the best situation for you to have to be in an office for 6 to 12 hours getting administered psilocybin and LSD. So if we could, we're investing in some companies that are building psilocybin analogs that are shorter duration and more consistent. Some that are even blocking the 5-HT2A receptor so that there's actually no hallucination, but you still have the neuroplasticity and the other physiological benefits. So from a legal perspective, you kind of have that pharmaceutical side where, in my opinion, is really where it's distinguished from cannabis. I think cannabis, when all the dust settles, it's a consumer packaged good. It's a CPG product. There will be, there are some pharmaceutical companies, there's Epidiolex, Sativex, Dronabinol. There are cannabinoid pharmaceutical drugs. But I think when the dust settles, cannabis, 90% of the market will be CPG, maybe 10% is going to be pharmaceutical. I think on the psychedelic side, it's going to be the opposite. I think 90% pharmaceutical, maybe 10%, not even CPG, because even in Oregon and Colorado, where they're rolling out legal frameworks, they're still requiring that it's done at what they call in Oregon a service center, or in Colorado, they call it a healing center. So rather than retail stores where you buy this compound and you take it home, that's how you do it in cannabis. In the psychedelic world, at least under Oregon and Colorado, which are the two legalized states thus far, you actually have to go into a center where it's actually administered. So it's a much different kind of structure. So I just see a psychedelic space. So you have FDA is one kind of legal structure. Then you have what some of the states are doing really with, the legalized framework. Then, like you mentioned, you have decrim, which is really just, there's not business opportunities for decrim. Decrim is just basically possession and use are low priorities for the city or state. Doesn't really allow commercialization in decriminalized jurisdictions. But then you have end of life use. So I think this is really an emerging space where there's federal statute, the Right to Try Act, that allows people who are, kind of at the end of their life and suffering to access medicines that are not FDA approved. I think there's been a lot of really good clinical trials. We invested in a company that licensed some research out of NYU for psilocybin for end of life demoralization, and they got incredible results. So I think
is there a documentary on that one?
There's been a lot of documentary.
Let's say there's something very familiar that I remember seeing of an end of life use, and it was here in the U.S. using psilocybin and other psychedelics for end of life use.
Well, there's currently a lawsuit. An attorney, Catherine Tucker, is kind of leading the lawsuit to get these patients access to the Right to Try Act. It's a whole mess. People really aren't able to access to the Right to Try Act, but it's being challenged in court. And then you have the religious use, which is also really expanding. We've done a lot of churches, for psychedelics. That's also a very, very gray area. So if you're planning to set up like a psychedelic church, it's really important you talk to an attorney that understands it and you are fully aware of the risks you're taking, because it is certainly not black and white. So that's kind of how I split it up. You got FDA pharmaceutical, you got the legalized framework like Colorado and Oregon. I think more states are going to be adopting that. The decrim stuff, which is just possession and use, doesn't really create any commercial market. You have Right to Try Act for people at the end of their life. And then you have the religious uses. That's kind of how I spent. And each of them have their own legal paradigm. Happy to jump into them in detail if you'd like. But those are pretty much the different kind of legal structures that we're going to be operating under.
Now, with these centers, like in Colorado and Oregon, what does it take for a person to get licensed in this?
Yeah, so Oregon's already, as of January of this year, they already started accepting applications. So much like cannabis, you apply to the state department that's overseeing the program, and you get the license. What's been a challenge in Oregon is they do have a provision in the state law that allows municipalities to opt out. We saw this in cannabis as well, that this is pretty common. And I think over 70% of the municipalities in Oregon opted out. So there were a few companies that got burnt on that, that didn't really plan the way they should have and bought real estate in municipalities that later went forward with opting out, and, they were stuck with this real estate. So really important in Oregon, number one, you got to be in a municipality that hasn't opted out. Then you got to apply for a license. And then you got to, once you get the license, you got to operate. It's these tend to be, the biggest thing right now that's being balanced in this legal, figuring out what the proper legal structure is. We want to create a container that ensures that people are safe. But on the other hand, we want people in marginalized communities to have access to these medicines. And so that's kind of the tension right now, is the more safeguards you put up, the more facilitators you require to be there, the more time you require them to spend after the session. That just increases the cost, which is better from a safety perspective, but is not so good from an access perspective. So, they're talking about like one administration could be up to like $3,500. In my opinion, there's a lot of people, and some people, I really encourage people to understand both sides of that coin. There's a lot of people who are blindly advocating for one or the other. On the access side, people are really like, this is too expensive, and they just want like no safeguards. And I really, really don't think that's the right approach. We need safeguards. This is brand new. People don't have the education. They don't know dosage. They don't know they don't know setting. They don't know much. If the public was more educated, maybe 5-10 years from now, hopefully we'll be in a position where the public is more educated on these compounds and they know how to responsibly use them. But I think in these early days, I think that these people who are arguing that there should be like no requirements and just decriminalize and let people grow and share and community healing, that all sounds very nice. But as soon as you have one or two bad occurrences, that's all it takes for the industry to take 20 steps backwards. So those people who are really advocating like access, then you have on the other side people who, want to put all sorts of red tape around it and, have multiple therapy facilitators there, require a certain amount of stay at the facility, all sorts of different requirements. So I think there needs to be a balance, and I encourage both sides to really understand the different interests that are involved.
There's so many ways. I'm sitting on I see this from a business perspective. I see it from a consumer. Ways that you could go about this. I love how you kept referring to it as medicine, though. I'm a firm believer that psychedelics should be used as medicine and not necessarily recreational. I know that there's a time and place, music festivals or certain things, they like to be on certain substances, and I get that. I understand that scene as well. There's also been, some tragic deaths and stuff because of unregulated products in those same scenes and overdoses. I really love the medicinal part of it because of the personal healing, and then just also the countless testimonies that you hear of people that have accomplished so much, if you will, therapy in a 4 to 8 hour psilocybin or LSD trip, or even a shorter 15-minute DMT trip than they have of years of therapy, of traditional therapy methods, So I'm a big advocate of it, but I fully support what you're saying of it needs to be done, and there needs to be some safeguards, because all it does take is one person to be tripping and then go driving down the interstate and cause a massive accident. And now we're just, we kill people, and now we're just set back. It's not the same. I try to tell people this because we're in the spaces that I'm involved in with being in cannabis, the hemp delta space, the alternative space with like the new Amanita craze coming out and finding out how to use those properly and stuff. And I have my own opinion about Amanita. I do actually look at Amanita as a more recreational mushroom and not a medicinal mushroom. I don't recommend microdosing Amanita muscaria at all, like you would psilocybin. But cannabis users, you can wake up, you can use it medicinally in the morning to help with, acid reflux, with IBS, with GERD. You can use it throughout the day to help with nerve pain or just different stuff. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend going on a lifelong psilocybin vitamin, That's not that.
I think part of the problem, our human brains are so simple that we try to make everything binary, so medical or recreational. And the reality is like, I see medical and recreational on a spectrum. I think in some capacities, even drinking alcohol after a hard day's work, you're wound up, if done responsibly. In a way, it's therapeutic. Sometimes I'm not a big drinker, but sometimes on a Friday night, I have my one drink and I kind of feel nice and relaxed, and it kind of allows me to unwind, right? So is that recreational or is that medical? Neither. It's somewhere on that spectrum. And, people's even going to a festival in many respects, like if you I mean, have an MDMA experience where your amygdala, MDMA is incredible because it releases oxytocin, which is like your heart opener, and it reduces your amygdala, which is responsible for fear and emotion. So you have this incredible sense of oneness and community with people, and to be at a festival and experience that level of love. To me, it opens up a window of our capacity to love one another and how we are all interconnected. It's not a hallucination. Like, MDMA allows you to access the reality that we are all so interconnected. And it's really about what you do after that experience. Integration is an important part. So, you could go to a festival and feel that love, and then the next day just forget about it and be like, wow, that moment was great. But now I don't feel that. Or you could take that experience and be like, wow, that really gave me a window into my capacity to love, and how can I carry that forward into my everyday life and integrate that into my lifestyle and my world on a regular basis without the compound in my system. So, I think really integration could sometimes be the difference of whether it's being used recreationally or medically. If you don't do anything afterwards and it was just a moment in time that you were enjoying yourself, that could be recreational. But at the end of the day, going to a festival and having your mind open and feeling that loving connectedness, certainly there's a level of it being therapeutic in that experience.
100%. I had a experience actually here recently, within the last couple months, with some friends, some very good friends of mine, and it brought us even closer. We all did a microdose psilocybin together, very low dose, and there was nothing hallucinogenic. Yeah, some stuff was vibrant, but we felt good. But our minds were open, and we were just on another plane of consciousness together. And since we were all on the same level, the cool thing is we all have very different backgrounds. We're all very unique individuals, culturally, religious, family, just everything very different. But on that time, that evening, we were all one. We all found the common ground. We were all on the same plane, and we explored new opportunities and thoughts, and brought our beliefs together and found that common thread that holds us all. So we're all human, and it was such a great moment. Like you said, it's nothing hallucinogenic. It's just opening your mind up and opening yourself up to one another. And man, that's very powerful. And that's where I completely agree with what you said, man. It's somewhere on that plane of in between medical and recreational. And it's very hard to define. And I just think it comes down to the time and place. That's everything that we use in life, time and place, and the way that we're being used it, and the thought that we have behind it, or
really the intention.
The intention. Thank you for the word. The intention that you have in the aftercare is very important. I love hearing about that. We had some people on, they're called Fireside. It's a nonprofit that specifically is basically like a helpline or a call center for psychedelic people using psychedelics or cannabis or really any type of substances. But most people call in is about psychedelics. And yes, they have people that call in during a trip that need help, basically like a trip buddy. But they have a lot of people that call in for aftercare, for the integration of the experience. Like, holy crap, I just had this mind-blowing experience, and I'm having trouble processing it, but I want to process it. And so just talking through it and seeing how you can apply that to your life going forward and actually make a change, like you were saying.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the integration is the most important part. There was recently a study published about like this critical period of time. They call it a critical period of time after a trip where your brain has more neuroplasticity. And so which really means like your brain is it's more malleable. Like you have an opportunity to kind of reset and change behaviors and become very self-aware and kind of restore your autonomy. So if you're addicted, for example, I had an addiction to nicotine vape. I see you vaping there. Dude, I was bad, and I've never had an addiction. I never tried a drug up until 3 years ago. So I'm kind of new to this psychedelic journey. I always carried the stigma that I thought it turned your brain into mush. And then when I started reading the research about 4 to 5 years ago, I started representing some doctors, setting up some research collaborations, and started investing in the space. And I actually started doing all that before I even tried any of these compounds. It's just based on the research I was reading. And then once I had my own experience, I was like, holy crap, this is the total opposite of what society has been telling me. And that's when I really got motivated to break down all these false social constructs that are built around us that these compounds are bad for your brain. Now, you need to have a good support system around you, but these are not, but your brain, if you look at like a brain scan while you're on these compounds, your brain is being lit up. It's the opposite. It's not being shut down. You have, you're opening up new neural pathways, and that time period afterwards, you're super, super self-aware, and you're really able to control your nervous system. So I was addicted to the vape pen, and I went to Beckley Retreats, which is in the beginning of June. So just recently, I was like fully addicted. I'd never been addicted to anything. I was like, this nicotine vape pen I woke up in the morning till I fell asleep, and I was like, this is not good. I've never been so dependent on something. So went out to Beckley Retreats. We're their lead investor. It's a 5-day psilocybin retreat in Jamaica. And I went out there with the intent to stop smoking this nicotine vape. If I didn't go out there with the intent, if I just went to a festival and took psilocybin, this isn't going to stop your nicotine vaping. That's why your intention is so important. I went out there with the intention of not smoking it anymore. And I'll tell you, I came out of the first ceremony and I was like, shit, I still want the nicotine vape. Like it's not a magic pill where all of a sudden, like you just don't want it. There are other psychedelic compounds like ibogaine that I've heard, do help with the cravings, but I still craved it. But what it did for me in the days after when I returned was I felt like I was in control. Yes, I wanted to smoke the nicotine vape, but it was something separate. It didn't define who I was. It was something separate, and I was able to say, like, I have the choice. I have a choice of picking this up. Whereas before, I felt like I had no control. So it really just restored my autonomy, and I was able to, even though every day still waking up wanting it, I was able to have control. And now I'm, about 60 days after, I've not taken one puff of a nicotine vape pen. Before going there, I'm telling you, I go to the gym every morning. I would challenge myself just to not take a hit going to the gym. That's all. I just want to make it to the gym, and I couldn't do it. I really, very few days was I able to get to the gym without taking a puff. And now here I am 60 days later, and I'm smoking. So I think not only on the mental health stuff side, but on the behavioral health, I think there's tremendous opportunities, various addictions and other behavioral health indications. We've actually invested a lot into psychedelics for various substance use disorders and behavioral addictions. I think there's tremendous potential because that time period afterwards, you're really able to take control of your behaviors. And with the right support, you could change those behaviors and rewire your brain and reprocess some of the trauma that maybe is causing some of that addiction.
Yeah, inspiring, bro. Bravo to you, first of all. It's been on my mind a lot, honestly, so maybe this is just also some inspiration for me that I need to quit vaping. I had quit smoking cigarettes back in, I want to say 2014, 2013. And then I started vaping, but I quit vaping in 2015. And I just picked it up again back in 2021. It was just recently. And I got back around a lot. It was because of where the space I was working in. I was going to a lot more trade shows again and stuff and just being around it. And was operations for, still am, but was in charge of the vape and smoke brick and mortar stores at that time now. Moved on, but taking in new products. And I was like, how the heck am I supposed to know if this is good or not if I don't try it? And it was horrible reasoning, but
look, when you're addicted, you're always going to find an excuse.
You will.
I was always pushing up. Oh, I'll stop this time, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, when I hear people tell me they quit like nicotine, like I never smoked cigarettes or anything, never really had addictions. A very, very controlled individual. I go to the gym every day, eat very healthy, work a lot of hours, and I love my work. I'd like to think I'm very much in control of most of myself, but I lost control with nicotine. So when I hear people say they quit cigarettes or quit vaping, it takes a lot of willpower. And I give people tremendous amount of credit because I like to think that I have a lot of willpower, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it without help, without the Beckley team. And I continued to do after I went to the retreat. They provide integration afterwards, and I worked with their team to, make sure I was, meditating, breath work, and, journaling, things of that nature. And it really did help. But it's, it's no joke. It's very, very hard to quit nicotine.
Yeah. No, thank you for the inspiration. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the molecule, if you will, but I had some guests on almost a month ago from Clear Mind Medicine, Dr. Adi Zuloff and Mark Hayden, a company that's out of Canada and Israel. Clear Mind Medicine, I challenge you to, just to look it up and see the amazing work they're doing. They have a molecule that they've created, a psychedelic molecule, if you will, but that has no psychedelic effects, no hallucinogenic effects or anything. And what they have found, the studies they've been doing, is it's helped specifically with alcoholism. And it just gives you the sensation that you've had enough, and that's it. So with the studies that they've done is people have taken it either before or right when they start their alcohol use, like right with their first drink, they'll take the substance. And after that one drink, even severe alcoholics that say, I have one drink and I can't stop till I'm blackout, they have one, maybe two, and after that, they're just done. They're not drunk, they're not necessarily high or anything. They feel done, satiated, they're good. And that was a molecule that was discovered and kind of made like, LSD. You can get the ergot and you can find it in nature, but to really do it like how we have nowadays, it has to be synthesized and made by man. There's so many benefits of stuff that are so medicinal, that are non-hallucinogenic, non-psychoactive, but can help with immense mental and psychological and even just habitual actions that we all have.
Yeah, I know the Clear Mind guys very well, and alcohol use disorder, AUD, is a very, very serious thing. People don't realize how big of an issue it is. We've invested, there's a company called Awaken we invested in. They work out of Imperial College of London. Dr. David Nutt's one of like the foremost doctors around psychedelics for addiction. They are moving into phase 3 clinical trials using ketamine for AUD. So, there's ketamine. We also invest in a company, Clairvoyant. They're using psilocybin to address alcohol use disorder. Lots of different companies that are trying to tackle this. But, also just gambling addiction. Awaken is working on gambling addiction, sex addiction. They're basically specialized on like the addiction side of things. So they have various different compounds with various different addiction indications. I think that's one area where there's tremendous potential. What's good about addiction from a clinical trial perspective compared to like mental health, like, treatment-resistant depression or major depressive disorder, is very hard to measure. There's not really objective endpoints for depression. It's basically someone filling out, a questionnaire saying like, are you still depressed? A bunch of questions trying to figure out, are they still depressed? Whereas with alcohol or gambling or sex addiction or whatever it might be, opioid addiction, you can measure it. Like how many drinks are you drinking per day? Are you still using opioids? So it's much more objective and makes it a little bit more easy to prove out in clinical trials. So we've been very interested on the addiction side of things. I love that. And the irony is that like people always ask me, they're like, wait a second, you're using psychedelics, drugs, Schedule I substances to address addiction? Aren't they going to get addicted? And the reality is that there's been a lot of work done. Psychedelics, for the most part, are not highly addictive, not a high likelihood for abuse. Dr. David Nutt did a whole project on this. It's a graph that's shown in almost every single psychedelic deck, but it basically showed the safety profiles. And compared to alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, how many people do you know addicted to psilocybin? Not many. No. Right? So not highly addictive, but there are other compounds. Ketamine, if misused, you can get addicted. Still not as addictive as alcohol or nicotine or things of that nature, but some of them can be addictive. But for the most part, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, psilocybin, ibogaine, these are not compounds that people generally get addicted to.
No, not at all. Not at all. If you got addicted to DMT, you must be you're an alien.
Yeah, right.
You're an alien. That's all I got to say. Dustin, thank you, man. I really appreciate this. Very informative and educational, and learned a lot today, and just bringing awareness to this. I keep saying it, but the renaissance that's happening. And I hope this one doesn't die off. I hope that we're able to successfully integrate this into our society in a productive and safe manner, and have the immense benefit that it really can for mankind. I'm not even kidding. For mankind, like we could really fix some problems in the world if some of these therapies and medicines were used as such. And, we used to use it. Go back hundreds of years ago, centuries ago, all of these medicines were used by the shamans, by the medicine woman, by the holy people to get you to that other place, to get you to that heightened state, to help you through things in your life. I hope we can get back to that. And I love the people that are supporting it, like yourself, that are investing in it and trying to bring awareness and and help us take on that new frontier. So thank you, Dustin, for what you're doing. And thank you for being here today. I appreciate it, bro.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. And thank you so much for covering these important topics.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure, man. You have a blessed day.
As well.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.